can give you a little bit of my background before I get into the philosophy of yoga. Might be helpful for you to understand kind of where I'm coming from and how I got here. And then it might be then easier for you to understand the philosophy that I'm kind of suggesting, and perhaps you'll be able to connect and appreciate it more. So my name is Brian, and I have been following the spiritual path intently and intensely since 2006. In 2006, I read a book called Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, and I loved it. And you want to know why?
Yes.
Because at that time my mind was a very scientific mind, very logical mind, very rational mind. And this Dr. Hawkins described spirituality in a way that I could intellectualize and make sense of. And so it appealed to my way of thinking. And so it was kind of like my bridge into spiritual things, because before that, I wasn't believing in, you could say, God. I was pretty much an atheist. So somehow that book really convinced me, and it talked about the nature of consciousness and measuring consciousness, which is interesting too. Measuring consciousness. And so he even had a scale from 0 to 1,000. And so 0 would be like very quote unquote low consciousness, hateful, deceitful, angry, rageful. And then like in the middle of that scale, you would be like kind of neutral. And then at the high end of the scale would be like Christ consciousness. Super open heart, so loving, joyous. Like that would be the highest at like 1,000. So I like this idea of like measuring, fit into my scientific mind. So I got very intrigued. And then I found a spiritual teacher in Austin by chance, who I had phone calls with. And the first time I had a call with him, we talked about consciousness and shifting consciousness. And then he did some intentions for me. We did some intentions together, and I felt a deep shift inside, like my mind entered into another dimension. And I can't, it's very hard to describe, but it was different than any other experience I've had. It just, like I was catapulted into some other world. And I said, this shift or this, and you could say it's kind of like a buoyant meditative state, like a kind of uplifting buoyancy, pushing my mind into a meditation naturally. And I was very intrigued, and I said, this is working. Something's happening to me. So I kept doing it and kept practicing it and following this particular teacher's guidance. And then I read a book called The Gospel of Ramakrishna. And that is a book written by one of Ramakrishna's disciples named M. They just call him M, because I think his real name is too hard to pronounce. Just call him M. And M writes this book about the life of Ramakrishna. And Ramakrishna lived in India around 1850. And he was a madman, but in a good way. He became very obsessed with a particular deity named Kali, this goddess, Kali. He fell in love with her for some reason, and he became extremely obsessed, and so he would face the statue of Kali, and every day bow down to the statue and beg Kali to start talking to him and guiding him. And then suddenly one day, the statue started to talk to him. Kali started to talk to him. And he's like, whoa. And then Kali started to give him guidance about do this, do that, do this, do that, like guiding him. And more every day he fell in love with this goddess. So much so that he'd be rolling around on the ground and in front of the statue and just begging Kali to just, bring him into her heart, to help him to feel her presence deeply. And so people considered him quite mad, crazy. And I thought to myself when I read this book that I wanted to feel what he was feeling, because he had fallen in love with his God. And it was such an extraordinary love. So intense that, I was reading the book and just crying and saying, how did this happen to him? I want to find out what really happened to him, and not just read about it, but I wanted to feel what he was feeling. So that was the real kind of catapult for my path, in which I began that search for that experience of love for the divine. And then in 2008, I met my teacher, Swami Purna, and so we lit a candle for him. And he, since 2008, has been my guide. And I remember going to fly from Los Angeles to New York City to go meet this Himalayan yogi in a small bookstore. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, except it was my current spiritual teacher's recommendation that I go, so I just kind of followed that. And I went there, and Swami Purna, entered the room, and before I even saw him, tears were streaming down my face. And I was moved like I had never been moved before. It's almost like my very soul shifted and moved. And I wish I could even describe it to you or share it with you as an experience. But it was the start of an amazing journey. Because since then, I would go see him a couple of times a year, because he comes from India, flies over to the United States a couple times a year. And I would go see him at retreat and have short darshan. A darshan is a meeting with a holy being. I would have a short meeting with him to just talk about my path. And he would always just say, just keep doing what you're doing, you're good. And I said, okay. And maybe he would give me like a mantra practice or something. And then one day, in 2012, so it's about 5 years later, approximately 5 years, I had a meeting with him. He just called me in, and we spoke for 3 minutes in this meeting, very short. And in the meeting, he said, Brian, now it's time for you to leave your old life and set out on the road for 2 years. Technically, I did it for 3, but he said 2 years at the time. Live in your van, live from your van, and just travel around the United States and Canada and share these gatherings with whoever will listen. So then, at the time, I had been running a financial planning business for about 11 years. Successful financial planning business. I had all the suits and nice clothes. I did well. I was running the business. And I sold that business. I sold my car. I gave away pretty much all of my belongings. I bought a van and I put a bed in the van. I named the van Persistence. I even had like a little solar panel installed on Persistence. I felt really special, you know, like solar panel, can you imagine? How cool is that? And then I got in the van and I set off into the sunset and proceeded to journey from city to city to city. And it ultimately ended up being 3 years that I traveled and lived from out of that van. And wherever I went, I would contact the churches, the yoga studios, the healing centers, and I would ask them if they would like to hold a special spiritual gathering in their location. Most people said no, but some people thought my journey was rather interesting. This sort of this American monk, because that's what people kind of termed it. In Sanskrit, they call it a sadhu. Sadhu is a renunciate, someone who has renounced the world in favor of finding God. And so it was kind of amazing, you know. I spoke in front of sometimes churches with 50 people, and sometimes no people came to the gathering, depending. But at the beginning, it was very difficult because I thought that the energy of these gatherings was so amazing. I myself could feel it, you know, surprisingly so. I could feel the energy and presence in the gatherings. I was so excited that I thought so many people would come to these gatherings because they just were so profound and transformative for me. And my, call them spiritual friends, attended the first couple of them and definitely could feel the energy and really encouraged me to keep going in spite of hardly anyone showing up at the beginning. And so I held, who knows, probably over 1,000 gatherings during those 3 years, probably more than that. I'm not even sure how many. And then after the 3 years, I came back to LA, and then I settled at the Soul Center, which is a yoga studio. It's actually a Kundalini yoga studio in West Hills, which is about 25 minutes away. And I live there now, and I hold regular gatherings 3 times a week on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturday evenings at 7 p.m. I also stream them as well online. Each gathering is different. Each gathering brings forth a different kind of energy and presence, and they are all healing in a profound way. And the energy helps each person according to where they are at in their spiritual journey. So each person is going to have a different experience of the energy depending on where you're at. So that's my background. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions?
I'm so intrigued. I dream of the life to announce, and it's been fantasy for many years. Right? I don't know what it's been like. I'm getting a one-way ticket. I'm heading to Bali, guys. See you later. But some of us have family and lineage and children and roots and things that we have responsibilities to.
Yeah.
I've always felt like the spiritual path sometimes becomes a very selfish path.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to dive so far inward,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of turn everything else off, right?
Yeah.
Because this all becomes distraction,
Yeah.
right? From what if that objective is just communication
Yeah.
with the divine.
Yeah. So let me.
These monks that sit in meditation all day in the Himalayas. It's
Yeah. So let me address that,
Yeah.
actually. Let me address that because it's a really good point. I don't expect you to renounce like I did and leave everything. Because we need,
It's a nice thought.
Cause
As great as it sounds.
because we need people working in all the fields to support a society to work together. So, you know, that's technically, it's not even possible to do that anyway, that everyone does that. But you can apply the principles of yoga and spirituality in your job. So you could be like a computer programmer, but you're the best computer programmer, right? You do an excellent job, you're in integrity with your work, you have good work ethic, you respect your boss, you respect your coworkers, you do kind things for your office, you really try to create a beautiful sort of supporting, loving environment where you're working. Like, those are all principles of yoga that you can do in your work. You don't have to go into the Himalayas in order to and meditate deeply for days and days and days. Simply genuinely try to be a good person with virtues, try to develop virtues. And a simple way to develop a virtue would be like driving on the 405 north by Santa Monica at 5:30 p.m. and just see how your patience is, see how you feel, and as you
I've always said, well, Jesus Christ was walking the earth today and having us drive on the 405, after working at 9 to 5. Like, I don't know how loving and patient he would be if he did that day in and day out, right?
So your practice would be to breathe and work on developing patience and say, I'll get there when I get there. This is my opportunity to be with myself and practice my breath and practice being calm and patient. And patience is a divine virtue. And a true saint, like Christ, has endless patience. It doesn't matter what he goes through, he will continue to be like this, still, quiet, deeply at peace. So that's a divine virtue. Divine means endless and infinite. It's unstoppable. It's a virtue that never shuts down, no matter how difficult the situation is. As an example, divine love would mean that you have love in all circumstances, that no matter what someone says or does to you or acts towards you, your heart is still open and loving. It never shuts down. It doesn't get angry, it doesn't get depressed, it doesn't get sad, it doesn't get lonely. It's just freely open and giving love, even to those who are so-called enemies. So, and that's, again, extraordinarily rare. And it requires a person to work on it every day. I mean, going to church on Sundays and just say, well, that's just my practice. It's like, that's just touching the tip of the iceberg. Every day can be your church, where you're working on yourself every moment. And the more you can become self-aware, the more progress you'll make on your spiritual journey. Now, having said that, it is extremely helpful to have a spiritual teacher who can pass on the vibration to you to make your life more in alignment with those teachings that I'm talking about. Somehow the vibration of the spiritual teacher catalyzes something deep inside you where you start to transform, and then you become kind of more naturally loving in more circumstances without having to try to work out every single bit of karma that you have. The teacher can help to sort of process a lot of the karmas that you can't even reach. When I mean karma, I mean kind of like your issues, your problems, your anger, despair, irritation, annoyance, impatience, all those things that are underneath the surface in your subconscious mind. A lot of that stuff, we just can't see it. We're not even aware of it. In fact, 99% of your mind is in the subconscious and unconscious mind, and you won't even be able to see it. So the teacher helps to dig that stuff out, to start clearing your mind on a deeper level. And that's what happens in these gatherings. The energy kind of goes deep inside you and starts to sweep away the cobwebs, so to speak, so that the light can arise inside you. And that's why we hold these gatherings. So.
Thank you so much. I would love to stay here longer.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. So that's kind of the background. So I then wanted to talk about the mystical path of yoga. And I would say the foundation of what yoga actually is and what it's designed to do. And you were kind of mentioning it briefly. When people hear yoga in the United States, they think of asana, which is a physical practice. And so if a person goes to a yoga class and they do the asana, and then they do the shavasana, they will feel relaxed, and they feel nice, and they'll feel energized. But the student is still on a physical level. The student still has physical consciousness, right? Which is normal human consciousness, normal. I'm a person and I'm walking around on earth and everything is physical and separate from me. But the word yoga means union, yog, to yoke. So union. So the real purpose of yoga is not to get a nice, relaxing physical workout. Real purpose is to bring the spiritual seeker into union with the cosmos so that the seeker feels one with everything. A direct experience of endless, infinite presence everywhere and identifying with that instead of physicality. And this is me. And this is me. And my emotions are me. Like that's still very much a sort of human level consciousness. So yoga is designed to, let's say the real mystical tradition of yoga, to break you out of the physical consciousness, which those people who are familiar with esoteric concepts is the root chakra. Root aspect of the mind is a belief that I am a person and everything is physical. And that's what you're feeling. And it's understandable that people have that experience because that's all that, even in yoga classes, they're doing physical practices. Everything in this world is designed to make you feel physical, pretty much. It's rare to find a gathering or a space where you walk in and there's an actual spiritual vibration. So the mystical path is designed to bring a spiritual vibration into the mix so that you can start to feel more expansive and not so local inside a body. So your consciousness doesn't feel inside here, centered in here. Your consciousness, as you get exposed to spiritual vibration, starts to feel more like this. And then gets wider and wider and wider until at some point you feel yourself to be everywhere. And so you're no longer in a particular location. So the body continues to walk around and do its thing, and the mind continues to do its thing, and everything continues to function, but you as consciousness are everywhere. And that state has been described by many, many yogis in many books, mystical experiences. That's what yoga brings you to. I mean, it's supposed to. So I will go back to this. It's difficult to achieve a spiritual state if you're being taught by yoga teachers who are in physical consciousness, who they themselves believe that they are inside a human body and they feel that as their reality. If you are training with a yoga teacher who is in that state, you're just going to get that energy. And that's going to kind of perpetuate the cycle of belief in I'm a body. So, like I said, however, you can come across a teacher whose consciousness is spiritualized. And when you come into the presence of such a being, you start to feel different. Things change. Your mind starts to alter. It's kind of like taking drugs.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, asanas, if you are given them and initiated by a true spiritual master, when I say initiated, I mean given. A master says, here you go, practice this asana. Now, when you practice the asana, it's a spiritualized asana. It's no longer a physical asana. Pretty much 99.99999% of yoga classes taught in the United States and around the world are just physically oriented. And when you come into a class of where you're practicing yoga asana with connected to true spiritual energy, it's actually shocking. Like, wow, what world have I entered? Which is why I teach Hatha Yoga.
Yes.
Because the difference is that when people come to my Hatha Yoga class, they're not there to get a sweat workout. They're there to commune with a very powerful presence that uplifts them into another dimension of their being. So, according to Patanjali, an ancient sage of India who developed the Eightfold Path of yoga, he talks about the different, we'll call them the stages. He also wrote sutras as well. But he also developed the Eightfold Path of Yoga, right? Where you start with the yamas and like the do's and don'ts of like, yeah, exactly. Where if you're gonna develop a higher state of consciousness, it's probably best to just start by being a good human being. So restrict yourself from hurting people and then encourage yourself to help people. That's pretty much what the yamas and the niyamas are, right? And treating your body like a temple. Eat healthy, fresh foods. Don't put poisons and toxins in your body like alcohol and cigarettes and drugs and all that stuff. Very sort of basic stuff that pretty much everyone knows. Now, not that everyone does that, but everyone knows that. It's like people know the path of health, but they're not following the path of health. People know the path of yoga, but they're not following the path of yoga. So it's one thing to be knowledgeable about it, but it's another thing to actually live the life of a true yogi. So
what do you think the break-in is in that?
The break-in, what do you mean?
Between
The knowledge
and the action. What do you think?
What's the bridge?
What's the bridge?
What makes it, yeah.
What is
When you go to a yoga class or a spiritual gathering and you have an experience that's beautiful and it inspires you, it will usually catapult your motivation to go, that had an effect on me. Maybe I should take these steps of yoga more seriously and try them for myself. So, some would say that I'm a motivational speaker. So when they come and they listen, they can be inspired and uplifted to follow the path of yoga because they see not only my own results, but the stories of saints that I might tell them. They go, well, I want to be like that. As an example, I might say some yogis, as they practice the path of yoga, suddenly develop superpowers. And those are called siddhis. Siddhis is a superpower. There are 8 of them, I believe. And like levitating and growing huge and growing small and astral projection and like being hot. Let's say you go to the Himalayas, but you can make your body hot. or you're unaffected by heat. Like those are siddhis, where you have these powers that occur as you shift in consciousness, right? So that might be a motivation for someone. So when you ask what's like the bridge to get them to take the action, each person has a key to unlock that desire to move forward, depending on what that person's particular motivation is. So as a teacher, you have to find out what makes that person tick, and then talk to them in their language. As an example, for me, reading Power versus Force is a very scientific language, so it really struck me here as an intellectual way, right? And that got me started, like I was so excited. Whereas another person might, let's say, watch a movie about a saint. And like, have you ever read or watched the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon? So here's a movie that both of you can watch together, Brother, Sun, or maybe even make it as like a little movie night, where you can watch Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon if you really want to inspire people. It's the story of Saint Francis, and Saint Francis lived around 1100 AD, and he was the son of a cloth maker, rich cloth maker, sold lots of cloths. He was very rich merchant in town. And Francis went to war, and when he came back, he was a different person. He was weird and kind of changed. And he was sick too, and he lay in bed for days, and when he woke up, he looked out his window, and he sees a bird. Just one bird, and it was chirping, singing, and it was hopping on the deck outside. And he looks, and he gets up out of bed, and he just kind of follows this bird, and he starts whistling, and he's just entranced by this bird, like he had fallen in love with the bird. People watched him get out into the ledge following this bird, and they thought he was kind of mad. But seeing the bird and the simplicity of this bird touched him so deeply that he had what you might call an awakening, where he was a different person. His life shifted after that, where he started to admire the birds and nature, the trees, and he wanted to be a part of nature. So he would then go out into the fields and into nature and the forest, and he would just commune and connect and just appreciate nature. And that was his bridge into the path of yoga. So every person is different, which is why every one of my gatherings also is a different topic. As an example, one topic that people really love is abundance. So oftentimes they think of money. But it's not just that. It's like expanding your definition of abundance and then bringing in a vibration of abundance that people can meditate to. But it's a divine abundance. It's like this huge, expansive energy where they can kind of come into the room and commune with this presence, and slowly but surely their inner world gets transformed into abundance. So it doesn't mean that, boom, suddenly they're rich and they own mansions and bags of gold and things like that. It means that they walk out and they feel inwardly abundant. And that's real abundance. You can have nothing, no material objects, and yet feel greatly abundant in your life. If you've ever gone to Mexico as an example, it's a perfect place to visit. When I went to Mexico and I went to visit some of the little towns and visited with people, I met so many people that were so content and happy, and they had, comparatively, practically nothing compared to people in the United States, yet so happy and peaceful. And I just, that was eye-opening for me. It's like, okay, the key to happiness is not to have a mansion and lots of money. There's something more to that. It's an inner abundance. So you can come to a gathering and connect into a vibration or a spiritual presence of abundance, and that can be your path to enlightenment. Right? And that's just one example. There's many, many, many other aspects of yoga that we can point to, different qualities that we can develop in our life depending on what subject I might speak about. But that's why I like to introduce the philosophy, because then there's more reason for them to come to class, because they see that there's much more depth than just getting some exercise and stretching done. You know what I mean? Like there's more excitement around it because they understand the background and what we're actually trying to achieve. It's so much more than a physical high and strength and flexibility.
Do you work with the bandhas
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
bringing that into your classes and stuff as well?
Yeah. The bandhas are very, very helpful for moving energy upwards, particularly the kundalini, but the prana otherwise upwards and up the spine. And as the energy moves up the spine, it shifts your consciousness. Now, many people who do the bandhas are still not feeling the shift in consciousness, which is interesting. So I would say that the energetic component of satsang is very helpful to kindle the actual function of the bandhas to move the prana up the spine. And as I said, as that occurs, you literally start to feel yourself larger, more expansive. You feel high, right? And then when that occurs, and it goes back to your question, that will be a kindling of a desire to take action and live a yogic life, because it's oftentimes a new sensation and new experience for a person as they tap into new energetic parts of their being that they weren't aware of before. And I'm not just talking about, oh, I felt peaceful or something. I'm talking about like a fire turning on inside you, or like I said, a buoyant meditative energy that's meditating you, and you're not doing anything, you're just sitting here and it's pushing you into meditation. You can't help it, and you're walking around. I mean, this happened in 2007. I went to a retreat where we did a very serious breathing practice, heavy breathing for over an hour, and 45 minutes in or so into that deep breathing, something turned on inside me. I call it a fire. And it was a meditation fire, and it never turned off after that. And I was a different person. So if I can share that with people, they will be very excited by a gathering such as this. If they come to a gathering like this and they just say, oh, that was a nice philosophical discussion, that was fun, we had some nice food, we got to sit and sing some songs together, and that's not enough. That's not going to motivate a person to come back. There's got to be an inner direct experience of the energy and presence to really compel a person to come back and keep at it. I have come across the rare person who is an intellectual and loves my talks. So he came for many, 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 many sessions. And at some point, he did have an experience. But it took him such a long time. But he kept coming. He kept coming, right? And I just wondered, like, this is interesting. Like, he's really trying, because he believed me. when I said that it was possible to get into a transcendental state of consciousness, he believed me. So he said, okay, well, I'm going to keep trying, even though I can't feel it right now. Which is kind of awesome. It's like kind of having faith, even though he's not having the experience. You know, it's kind of neat. You know, but that doesn't usually happen. Usually people will come, if they don't feel anything, they'll just think it's entertaining, they'll leave and they won't come back. It just as it is. But there are also certain people that are spiritually oriented, but they don't know that they're spiritually oriented until they come to a gathering like this and it sparks something and they go, I felt it. And they'll even come up to me and they say, I felt something. And I never felt this before and I didn't know that this is possible. It triggers something. So the person didn't even know that they were spiritually connected, but they were ready or ripe to receive the teachings, because the teachings are not the words. The teachings are the vibrations underneath the words. It's like the words are a carrier wave, and there's an underlying energy, and it's not just like an emotional vibration or something, and it's not just the sound of the mantra. Because some people think, oh, if I listen to the mantra and I just chant it, that I'm going to become enlightened or something. You connect to the mantra through the spiritual being who introduces it to you. If you just get the mantra on Google and then you start chanting the mantra, you might get a little bit, but not much. It's going to be kind of a flat mantra. So to receive the power word from the spiritual being and then you practice it will be far more effective and will be much more likely to trigger the spiritual state that you're looking for. One more thing to say too, which is everyone is on their own spiritual path. Everyone is. They may not feel spiritual energy. In fact, most people don't. But they have to go through their own process to finally come to the realization that simply chasing after physical goals in the world is not enough to make them happy. Because just, whatever people do, eat food, drink wine, and have sex, or whatever it is that people do nowadays. Pretty much, right? This is exciting, but the thing is those things only give you a high for maybe 30 minutes or an hour. And then you're back with your mind, and you're back with your emotions, and you're back with your problems again. Right? Then what? You had a temporary high, but it didn't mean that you got out of your problem consciousness. Here, we are aiming to break you out of your problem consciousness once and for all, where it catapults you into a state of love, joy, and bliss, and it never shuts off, and it's just this divine flow like a river. That is what we're here to do. And as you can tell, not a lot of people are searching for that, simply because when we enjoy the physical things of the world, it's immediate gratification, and everyone wants immediate gratification. You go home, you turn on the TV, you watch some TV, you eat some food, you go to bed, you go to sleep, and you go and you work the next day, and it kind of works like that. And most people live that life until they retire. They saved in their 401k. Now they can enjoy going on vacations, and then after the vacations, they enjoy their grandkids, and then they die, and then that's it. I mean, that's pretty much the life. I'm not trying to be dry or mean about it. I'm just saying that it is not common to find a person who really decides, I want to follow the spiritual path. Even the disciples of Christ abandoned him at the end. And he died on the cross, right? Even those disciples who were supposedly very dedicated to him, even they left in the end. So it's not, the spiritual path, you could say, is not so easy, because you have to face your fears, and you have to kind of go against your normal habits in life, which have gotten you into your comfortable place. You know, I have gone through extraordinary discomfort, and I could tell you, I could talk to you for days on the things that I've done to get out of my comfort zone, where I've cried for days, and things that I've done that put myself into situations where I cannot believe I did it. But I came out the other side, and I was like new and radiant, and my mind was illuminated, my being. And you know, someone was asking me the other night at a gathering, because I had a full moon gathering last night, said, well, what is it like to be Brian right now? What's your state? And I said, you know, my being is on fire. Like, it's transforming, like it's swiftly changing, like it's this fire. So people who come around can just simply, I can just simply share the fire with them if they want to kind of warm their hands or whatever. And that's the idea. It's kind of like the spirit, but it's spiritual fire. Like who I am is burning up.
Your soul.
Yeah, what I mean, and I'll say it a different way, my different negative emotions, negative thoughts, and ego, all of that seems to be burning. And as it burns, something else arises out of it. And that people may be able to feel that illumination that comes out of the burning away of the ego. And I'm not saying that I'm very far on my spiritual path at all. I'm saying that I'm just like everyone else. I'm kind of walking the path and trying my best. Maybe the only difference is that I made spirituality a priority in my life, that I wanted to really dive deeply. And now particularly desiring to share with others, because it's been such an amazing, magical, mystical journey that I never expected. So.
I've got so much I want to say, but I don't know. Did you ever reach points on your journey where the outer world pulled you back in, and those distractions or responsibilities were, right? It's like
It does it every day.
every day.
Every day it does.
Where you're like, well, I've got, $7,000 of overhead. I have to make sure the plum
Right.
meets every month so that the
Right.
center can exist.
Every day.
You know what I mean? It's like, I hate that my mind goes there, but it's there.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, well, if what my intentions are pure and my
Yeah.
heart is pure,
Yeah.
with this mission of making the center available, the mission of making all of these teachings available to every human being that
Yeah.
wants them, right? How is it not just like reining in where I can just focus on that,
Right.
right? Where I
So
think about
let me.
Jiddu Krishnamurti, right? He came and it was like immediately there's people out there sponsoring and offering, Yogananda, everybody. It's like the universe just provided so these things can take place.
So I'll address that.
Yeah.
It's actually a very simple answer. A very simple answer to your question. Simply continue to do your spiritual practice every day consistently, and it will all fall into place. Your mind will stop being bothered by these things, and the universe will support your quest and what you wish to do. You need to develop patience, but patience will occur as you're doing your regular sadhana, because the sadhana is like the bellows that is blowing the coals, and the coals get hotter and hotter every day. And bit by bit, that energy of your sadhana starts to take over your being and put you into meditation, such that you won't even have those thoughts of worry. You'll just do what you need to do in order to take care of the overhead and the students and all that, and you'll be in the flow, but there won't be an added layer of worry or concern or stress. It'll simply be more of a flow, because what can stop you is not that you don't have because you can have a great plan, but if you're stressed underneath, that's like your inertia. That's like your
immediate resistance.
Right? Yeah.
Pulls me right out of the vibration,
Yeah.
and I know it.
And that's why the sadhana is so helpful for you, and you'll notice bit by bit every day you'll start to feel more and more calm. And you know, if I introduce you to other spiritual practices, you may incorporate some of those into your life if they suit you and if you get excited by any of them. They might be helpful for you in achieving what you want to achieve. Yeah.
Are you a TM practitioner, teacher, or is that?
That's a different.
I mean, you just mentioned like power of the mantra.
Yeah. I teach so many different mantras based upon what the person's particular goal is. So some people come in and they've got a lot of body problems. So, like as an example, my Tuesday night gathering at the Soul Center will be all about healing the body and the senses, right? So it's not just that, oh, we're going to disappear into some spiritual states and never come down and everything is going to be so beautiful and angelic and oh, I'm so enlightened. It's not like that. Like people come and they have genuine physical problems. And so I can kind of like prescribe to people particular mantras and vibrations to assist them in transforming that physical thing on a deeper level. Because the physical thing isn't just physical. It comes from an energetic aspect of your being that's out of balance. And you can use mantras to heal and cure that. Right? So healing your body is also a path to enlightenment and illumination. Right? So I'm not limiting to just transcendental states. I'm like, okay, you can bring your whole being, your emotions, your mind, your body, your soul, everything into alignment with the divine vibration. One could say that is the whole path, or the Purna path. Swami Purna. Purna means whole and complete, meaning no stone left unturned. Everything that's a part of your being gets transformed into divinity. You become completely healed on all levels. Fully integrated into life, being able to participate in whatever job that you do and whatever family activities that you have. But the difference between the enlightened being and the human is the human being has the aspect of a river of stress underneath everything that they're doing, whereas the enlightened being is simply flowing with everything and doesn't have the stress. It just doesn't occur to them. And they could be responsible for an entire country. You know, there have been enlightened beings that are head of an entire country. So just because you're working in the world doesn't mean that you can't do your sadhana. You can't do your spiritual practice every day. And there's something to be said about a spiritual seeker who has a lot of responsibility and still yet does their sadhana consistently and is committed to that. Because it is said, as you take one step towards God, God takes 100 steps towards you. So simply making the commitment and promise to yourself and to your soul that I will do this practice, spiritual practice, every single day is taking a huge step. Like it's really lighting the fire underneath you. And so that's what I would suggest you start out with. And then just allow things to unfold. Don't worry too much about your being stressed about all the activities. Just try to follow your commitment of what you intend to do with your sadhana.
I find that when you go on your spiritual path, that more obstacles occur. And it's kind of like, yeah, those obstacles are coming your way, but because you're at a higher vibration, they don't affect you as much, so to speak.
Yeah. So just because you become spiritual doesn't mean that the quote-unquote problems end, or the challenges or the obstacles end. You know, the same things will keep hitting you, except you'll be flowing through your problems gracefully, as opposed to resisting them and stressing out about them. You have a completely different attitude about them, a completely different feeling about them. You're way more peaceful and relaxed about them, and just not so bothered anymore. And you'll know it. One day, something will happen to you, or let's say your table falls apart or something like that. You're like, oh, right. Put it back together, and you have no reaction. You're just all good, right? It's like that's what happens. And you go, wow, I'm different than yesterday. Yesterday, I really reacted to that. Now I don't have a problem at all, right? And you can do little things like that, because you've got to notice your progress. So from one day to the next, you notice, oh, I normally react to this, and now for some reason, I'm not bothered. It's like you eliminated one of your buttons. See, a button is when someone does something to you and triggers you, like presses your button, you go, ow, and you get angry and you lash back, kind of like that. Whereas if you purify your button and you release it, then when they do the same thing, the person doesn't feel bothered by it. They might even say, oh, that's just them, that's their personality, it's just what they do.
Yeah.
But you're not personally offended like you used to be, because your button is gone.
I was just curious because you mentioned that you practice other spiritual practices as well. So what were those other spiritual practices?
Yeah.
So you said you do the mantras,
Yeah.
and then the yoga as well.
Yeah. Probably the best thing for me to do if I hold another class is to talk about the Eightfold Path of Yoga and the different steps and put them in the context of what I'm talking about.
Amazing,
Because the Eightfold Path of Yoga will answer your question. All those things I do, including asana. So, practicing nonviolence is probably my primary practice during the day. And nonviolence means nonviolence in deed, like your action, your words, and your thoughts. So every day I'm looking and self-reflecting and seeing, how am I thinking and how am I speaking and how am I acting? And is it attacking a person or is it from a place of kindness? And I really self-reflect. I might journal at the end of the day and really consider that. Right? That would be one of my practices, to really look at myself and see where I can improve each day, and also where I went right. So the journaling, I would say, has been a huge part of my spiritual practice. Another great practice I do is releasing negativity. So I'll have a releasing negativity journal where I'll write down all the negative feelings that I have. Maybe I feel depressed or sad or sorrowful or angry or whatever, and I'll write these all down with an intention to release them. And then that starts to get it out onto the paper and I start to release it. That would be another practice that I do. And then, of course, I do pranayama, breathing, which is probably the easiest physical way to sort of release your stress. But it's also, you can do spiritualized pranayama, which is a whole different ball game where it sends you into a spiritual state. And then, of course, asana. And then dhyan. Dhyan is like I'm focusing on an object. As an example, my practice might be to look at the picture of Swami Purna and just focus on it, and just having your attention on a picture of a saint already can start to purify your negativity just by looking at it. So that's another practice I do. That's called dhyan, or concentration. Or I should say, dharana is like broken concentration. Dhyan is total concentration. And then the final one is samadhi, which is the final state of yoga. And that's what yoga is designed to get you to. And samadhi is the union with the cosmos, the union with God, whatever you want to say. Yeah. When you focus on the thing and then you and that thing merge, you become one. So I just kind of briefly described the Eightfold Path of Yoga, but that would be, again, a whole other topic that would be very, very helpful for yoga students who want to know really what they're doing, why they're coming here.
Who's it else? I think it's Jessica Tar. Jessica Tar spoke as well too. It's well.
Tattva, yeah.
Yeah, he talks about it as well, right?
Yeah,
In his sutras
right.
as well too.
He does. Yeah. Yeah. So, I'd like to conclude with a mantra that we can sing together. So we get a lot of time to sing or chant. Mostly it was talking, but hopefully helpful for you. So we'll chant together the mantra Hari Om. And Hari Om means hurry home. Meaning kind of hurry home, go back to your source, go back to your true being, your true self, your own soul. Find out who you really are beyond emotions and mind and thoughts. Who are you? Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. Guru is Brahma, the creator. The Guru is Vishnu, the sustainer. The Guru is Shiva, the destroyer. The Guru is indeed the Supreme Being. I bow to that Guru. This is whole. That is whole. From wholeness comes the whole. When we take away the whole from the whole still